Okay, good morning, everybody, and we are starting a very exciting topic today. We're starting what is called the Sheish Zechiros, which is known as the 6 remembrances. Again, as we've been learning all of these, it's already 3 or 4 years that we're learning together on Thursday mornings. We've been going through the Siddur. We went really from the beginning of all the brachas through the Shemona Esrei all the way till the end of Aleinu. And then we decided to spend time going through the Yud Gimel Ikrim, which were the 13 principles of faith that we have, which speak all about the 13 central ideas that a Jew has to become expert in order to understand and to know what it means to be a Jew, what our faith, what our belief is really entails. And we finished that, Baruch Hashem, last week after studying it for over a year, carried us through the difficulties of the coronavirus. Here we are almost 1 year later. We're still on Zoom. We're still somewhat on lockdown. We still haven't come back to learning in person yet, but we're going to get there, Be'ez Hashem. So now, today, we are beginning the next part, or the next idea that we find in the Siddur. This really actually comes before the Yud Gimel Ikrim, and anyone that would like to can take a look inside. I'm looking at the Art Scroll Siddur, for those of you that are looking. It's on page 176. It's at the end of the Shachris, the end of our davening. And it says over here that we have something called the Sheish Zechiros, the 6 remembrances. These are also going to be Amunah building ideas, faith building ideas for each of us to carry with us in our life. And number 1 is, there's a mitzvah to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim, to remember the Exodus from Egypt. And it quotes over here a pasuk. Maybe we'll go through all 6 first, and then we'll go back one by one. Number 1 is to remember the Exodus from Egypt. Number 2 is Zechiras Maimer Har Sinai, to remember the revelation which took place by Har Sinai, by Mount Sinai. That's this week's parsha. Number 3 is Zechiras Maisa Amalek, is to remember what Amalek, the nation of Amalek, tried to do to us when we were leaving Egypt, and there was no nation that would start up with us. Amalek came to try to destroy our fervor. The number 4 is Zechiras Maisa Egel, this sad, unfortunate scenario that took place in the Midbar, in the wilderness, after we received the Torah. Suddenly, 40 days later, the Jewish people are dancing around the golden calf. We'll have to see the details of that when we get there. Number 5 is Zechiras Miriam. It's Miriam, the sister of Moshe Rabbeinu. She spoke Lashon Hara, she spoke gossip about her brother Moshe, as we'll see there, and what her punishment was. And lastly is Zechir HaShabbos, is remembering Shabbos. It's not something to remember only on Friday when you're at the store shopping, or Shabbos morning when you're making kiddush and eating cholent. Really, it's something that a person has to remember every single day of the week. Now the question is, first of all, we'll have to see why these 6 remembrances, these things that we have to remember, are so central to our belief system. I'm sure that you can already imagine to yourself why it's these 6. But we have to see also, what is the point? So much of what we're going to mention over here in the 6 zechiros, in the 6 remembrances, these are things that we mention in our davening. These are things that we live with either on a daily basis or at least once a week, for example, like Shabbos we said. So what is the point over here that we have to solidify these ideas at the end of a davening? Again, if a person davened correctly, that means, as we pointed out previously, by the time you get to the end of davening, you're in another world. You're in another world of Amunah, you're in another world of your Dveikis, of your connection with Hashem. You see things clearly, you're inspired, you're motivated, you're revved up for a great day in front of you. So what's the point at the end of davening over here that we once again have to remember and remind ourselves of these 6 things? So in the Siddur called the Eitzat Tfilos, he brings down over here the following. Kasu HaMekubalim, the Kabbalistic rabbis teach us, mitzvahs essay al kol adam, there is a positive commandment on every single person. Lahaskir bepeh, to mention with their mouths, Elo hazechiros, these 6 remembrances that we are going to be discussing, the muftach leishu ben olam haba, and you're guaranteed say the Mekubalim, say the Kabbalists, if you will mention these 6 things every day, prepare with your mouth, not just think them, not just study them, but you'll actually say over the psukim, the verses, as we're going to see that are there, you will then be someone that is guaranteed a promise from Hashem Himself that you are going to be a Ben Olam Haba, you will be a member in the world to come. Now the world to come is reserved, it's a place that is reserved for those people who lived a life that was focused in on Avodas Hashem. There are people that lived a life where they were able to understand every single day, to the best of our abilities, what our Kodesh Baruch Hu wants of us. There are people who lived a life of Amunah, even in the difficult times of their life, they trudged through with faith and with bitachon, with trust in Hashem. And therefore say the Mekubalim, the Kabbalists, that if you will begin to recite these 6 remembrances every single day, Maskir b'peh, you have to say it with your mouth. Because as we will see, when a person says over the words, you come to believe deeper in that which you are talking about. It's nice when you think about it. It's nice when you read it in a book. It's nice when you hear a drasha, when you hear an idea that somebody else is telling over to you. However, once that you are the person who is talking it over, and you are saying it, and you're saying it with more understanding and more kavanah and more belief, then you will know that you are the person who is going to be muftach, promised, guaranteed. You'll be a member of the world to come because it becomes your essence. Words create our reality. The ideas and the messages that come out of our mouth, those are what make us who we are. As the Rabbeinu Yonah writes in Mishlei, it says in the pasuk over there, Ish lefi mahalalai, a person according to his mahalalai, to his praises. And the simple explanation in those words means that whoever praises that person, whoever talks nicely about him, you can see his reputation, you can see his kavod, his honor based on that. But Rabbi Yonah says that's not the understanding. Ish, a person, lefi, according to mahalalai, what he praises. A person according to what they talk about. A person is identified and a person is understood and a person creates their reality based upon the words and the things that they speak about. And therefore the Mekubalim, the Kabbalists are telling us that if you in fact will be a person who says these 6 things every single day, not just thinks them, or comes to a class on Thursday mornings, I appreciate that you came this morning, but a person that will every day at the end of davening, before they run out into their busyness of the hectic world that we live in, they will begin to recite these 6 ideas and they'll think a little bit about what they're saying. Muftachlo, you're promised, you're guaranteed, you become a member of the world to come. And why do you become a member of the world to come? Because that becomes your mitzias, that becomes your reality. You are what you speak. Not only you are what you eat, as we all know, after 11 months of COVID, but we are what we speak. The things that we talk about and we mention and are on our minds, that is our living spiritual reality. So as we begin to embark upon these sheish zechiros, these 6 remembrances that we're supposed to recite daily, we have to keep in mind that the point is that as we say them, as we articulate, as we delve into the meaning of these 6 things, we will become people that are living, literally we are living with this amunah, living with the faith of these 6 ideas, which we're going to see are central in the life of the Jew. So let's begin with number 1 over here. Number 1 is, as we mentioned, is Yetzias Mitzrayim, is to remind ourselves of the exodus of Egypt. And it's quoting over here a pasuk, a verse in Sefer Devarim, Parshas Re'eh, Perek Tes Zayin, which is the 16th chapter in Parshas Re'eh, and it is verse Gimel number 3. And it says, it's talking over here about the mitzvah, we're talking over here about Pesach, the Seder, eating of the Korban Pesach, of the matzah, and then the pasuk says like this, Le'seichal alav chametz shivas yamim. A person is not allowed to eat chametz for 7 days. Rather, toichel alav matzah is lechem oini. You have to eat matzah instead during these 7 days of Pesach. Ki bechipazayin yatzasa me'eretz Mitzrayim, because you left Egypt quickly. As we know, we just had it in 2 weeks ago, the Parsha. At the end of Parshas Boy was the Exodus from Egypt. It's when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gathered in all the Jewish people that remained and he said, out of here right now. And we learn over there's a verse that says it was done bechipazayin, it was done quickly. Once the exile could last for years and years, centuries if necessary. Klal Yisrael officially was in the Gullus, was in the exile 400 years. 210 of those years was very harsh work and slavery and enslavement and bondage from the Egyptians. But when it came time for the Geula, for the redemption, it came b'chipazon, it came in an instant. And since it came so quickly and so rapidly, as we know, there was no time for the loaves of bread that the Jews were carrying with them to rise. So what did they end up carrying? They took with them matzah. Matzah, flat bread that cooks quickly. It doesn't have time to leaven and to inflate. It's just a little cake over there of matzah bread. So says the pasuk over here, the reason that we eat matzah on Pesach is to remind us how quickly the Geula, the redemption, came to the Jewish people. And then the pasuk concludes and it says the following. Leman tiskor, in order that we should remember, as yoim tzeisucho me'eretz Mitzrayim, to remember the day that you left Mitzrayim, Egypt, kol yemei chayecha, all the days of your life. Our intention with this mitzvah of eating matzah is to remind us of Yetzias Mitzrayim, kol yemei chayecha, all of the days of our life. Now obviously, this pasuk, this verse, is a little bit problematic because we only have an obligation to eat matzah during the holiday of Pesach. So how is it possible that if we just eat matzah for 7 days or 8 days over the Yom Tov, the holiday of Pesach, how does that remind us, Tizko es yoim seisecha me'eretz Mitzrayim, kol yemei chayecha, you should remember the day that you left Mitzrayim, Egypt, all of the days of your life. Those are only 7 days of the year. How can it be all the days of your life? So perhaps from this verse is where the Mekubalim, the Kabbalists, learn that there is a mitzvah incumbent upon a person every single day of their lives to remind themselves of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the Exodus from Egypt. There is something that is so central and something that is so important and valuable in our realm of emunah, of our faith and our belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that we must constantly, daily, at the end of our davening, and as we'll see, it happens throughout davening as well, we're always mentioning the Yetziah, the Exodus from Egypt. Now, why is it that this Exodus, that this redemption, the Yetziah, the Geula, the exile that the Jewish people were in and that eventually they were redeemed from, why is it that this itself is the most central idea in our faith? So over here in this siddur of the Oitzah Tfilos, he brings from the Ian Tfilah the following idea. He says, Af al pi shekvar hiskarno oisa b'kriyas shema shel shachris shtei pa'amim, even though that we already mentioned in our morning prayers of Shema, twice we spoke about the Exodus from Egypt, u'b'kriyas shema shel arvish shtei pa'amim, and at night when we say Shema, we mention it twice as well. So there's no shortage of times during the day, morning and evening, that we're already mentioning Yetzias Mitzrayim. Niskarinu oid pam biyoim. We have to mention it another time during the day. Why? Kedei ligboya ulachazek bilibeinu. Because we need to affix and to strengthen in our hearts as ha'emunah v'abitachon, the faith and the trust, Shego aleinu chazak Hashem tzvakei shemai, that our Redeemer, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is almighty and He is all powerful. Umisha goal es aveiseinu mimitzrayim, and the same God that redeemed our forefathers from Mitzrayim, from Egypt, hu yigal eisanu b'karov, he is the one that is going to redeem us soon and speedily in our days. Says the Iyuna Tefillah, that yes, we mention Yetzias Mitzrayim in Kriya Shema. Yes, we mention it at other times. Even you'll find other parts of the prayers where we talk about Mitzrayim. He says, but when a person is in the midst of their davening and they're going through the words, it's not so clear that a person is actually stopping and they are thinking and they are digesting and they are allowing it to ruminate and resonate inside of them what exactly the message and the meaning of those words and those prayers are. So therefore it's quite possible that, that although you mentioned Yetzias Mitzrayim, although you said the words in Shema twice about the exodus from Egypt, although that we find other places in our davening that refer to Klal Yisrael in Mitzrayim and leaving Mitzrayim, the splitting of the sea, going to the other side, having the emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all of that is true. It's in our prayers. Nevertheless, when a person is davening, we all know ourselves, and that is we're not always so focused in on the real messages that are there. So what should you do? Says in Tefillah, that's why the Mekubalim, the Kabbalists said over here, that at the end of davening, before you run out to the street, before you go have your cup of coffee, before you're going to check all the WhatsApp messages that you missed while you're davening Shemona Esrei, the very important videos over there that you have to see that's making fun now. We used to make fun of Trump, now we'll make fun of Biden. Fine. Before you get into all of that, a person has to stop and they have to think to themselves, what is Yetzias Mitzrayim all about? The central part in the history of our nation, which is why we are here today, is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim. And we want to be kaiveh, we want to drill it into our hearts and our souls. We want to be mechazik, we want to strengthen ourselves in understanding that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is all-powerful and He is almighty and He is the one that redeemed us from Mitzrayim. And the same powerful and almighty omniscient God who redeemed a nation that was 210 years under the rule of slavery of the Paro and Egypt, so too, although that we find ourselves thousands of years after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, we have been through so many trials and tribulations, so much suffering and pain of Klal Yisrael over 2,000 years, and we're including in there inquisitions, destruction of the temple, pogroms, pillaging, Holocaust, anti-Semitism on the rise. We have experienced all of that. Nevertheless, we believe be'emunah shleima with complete faith that just as HaKadosh Baruch Hu redeemed the Jewish people from Egypt, which seemed an impossible place. Mitzrayim, we know, means meitzar, means constricting. It means confining. Chazal tell us that there never was an Eved that was barech min Mitzrayim. A slave never escaped and ran away from Egypt. And yet our entire nation, men, women, and children, 3 million people altogether, not that we didn't have to escape. We weren't running for our lives. HaKadosh Baruch Hu opened up the gates of Egypt and He says, go out into the wilderness. So just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu was able to bring the great salvation to the Jewish people at the times of Yetzias Mitzrayim, we have to keep in mind our faith is hinged on this idea that Hashem is our Go'aleinu, He is our Redeemer as well, and He's going to bring the Ge'ula Shleima B'Karov speedily and in our days. Now the Sefer HaChinuch, when he speaks about this mitzvah over here, of reminding oneself about Yetzias Mitzrayim, he says over the following. He's talking over here about the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. Again, once we're speaking about Pesach, we might as well bring down these mitzvahs. And that is, we know that on the night of the Seder, every single person has an obligation to be able to tell over to themselves and to their children and to their grandchildren, to their spouses, to whoever is around the table, And as we know, if a person would be sitting all by themselves on the night of the Seder, which last year, Pesach happened for the first time perhaps in history, that there were so many people that were sitting all by themselves the night of the Seder because the way coronavirus worked itself out, we couldn't join in with our families as normal, or our friends, or relatives and the like. Even if a person would be sitting by themselves, mitzvah l'saper b'yitzias Mitzrayim kol halayla, they have a mitzvah to tell over the story of Yitzias Mitzrayim, the exodus from Egypt, the entire night. Now why? Now that's one night. That's the one night of the Seder. 2 nights here in Chutz La'aretz, outside the land of Egypt, outside the land of Israel. But this idea that there's such an intrinsic mitzvah of remembering and reminding ourselves and going into the details, what is so essential and so incredible about it? So the Sefer HaChinuch writes the following words. And he says, Mishar she mitzvah zu, the roots of this mitzvah. Masha Kosov b'Korban Pesach, he said, I've written it already, I've described it earlier, but I'm going to describe it again. Don't be so surprised that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has commanded us in many different mitzvahs that revolve around the Naftali. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has commanded us many different mitzvahs that revolve around Yetzias Mitzrayim, the exodus from Egypt. As a person will see in the other Mefarshim, the other commentators as well. If you look through the Chumash and you see all the mitzvahs that we have, it is important to point out that so many of our mitzvahs revolve around the story of the exodus of Egypt. So many. We just mentioned Kriya Shema in the morning and the evening, Tefillin, Kiddush on Friday night, Shabbos is Zeicher Yetzias Mitzrayim. So many Yom Tov that we have is Zeicher Yetzias Mitzrayim to remind us. The Sukkah, the Lulav, everything to remind us. Eating the holiday of Pesach and all the myriad of details that are there. There's no holiday in the entire year that has more mitzvahs than the mitzvahs of Pesach. No other holiday. The preparation in advance, koshering the house, getting yourself ready, making the matzahs and the like. And then the night of the Seder itself, I think the Vilna Gaon says there's like 83 mitzvahs on the night of the Seder. There's no greater night of mitzvahs that a person can have. And it's all to remind us of Yetzias Mitzrayim. Why is this the most incredible thing? Let's remind ourselves about the creation of the world. What about Yetzias Mitzrayim? So he writes the following. It's filled with many, many mitzvahs, essay, mitzvahs leis, positive commandments, negative commandments. Ki yisoid gadol v'amod chazak b'torasenu v'mnusenu. The reason is because the exodus from Egypt and everything that comes along with it, which means the slavery, what we were doing in Egypt, what was taking place over there, as we will see as we go along in the Mefarshim, the details of the story. All of this, says the Sefer HaChinuch, is the following. It is all a great foundation and a strong pillar of our Torah and emunasenu and our emunah, our faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which means the foundations of Torah and the pillars of our emunah are based upon how we understand Yetzias Mitzrayim. Therefore, that's why constantly in our blessings and in our prayers, we are always mentioning Zecher liyetzias Mitzrayim. Remind yourself of the exodus from Egypt. Tomorrow night, Friday night by Kiddush, one of the things that we're going to say is Zecher liyetzias Mitzrayim. It is a remembrance of that which took place in Mitzrayim. In the Shema, it's Zecher liyetzias Mitzrayim. A man puts on tefillin, it's to remind us of the exodus from Egypt. Why so many, says the Sefer HaChinuch? Because it is the great foundation and the strong pillar of our existence. Levishu lanu ois u'moifes gomor, because it is a completely wondrous sign. B'chidush ha'olam, on the idea that HaKadosh Baruch Hu continues to renew the world and creation constantly. V'chiyesh Elokah kadmoin, there is a God that existed before this world. Chafetz v'yochel, He can do whatever He desires. Poyel kol hanimtzayis el hayesh shehem alav. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is able to do whatever He wants in this world to all of the creatures and creations that are here. Ubiyadai lishnoisam el hayesh sheyachbotz b'kol zman min hazmanim. And it's within His hands to change the reality for whatever it is that He desires, because man, all of the time, min hazmanim, from any of the times in the world, as we see in Yetzias Mitzrayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu manipulates the nature. He shows that He is the king over the universe. He defies all of the mysticism that revolves around the chukei hateva, the laws of nature. And He shows, I am the one God of this world. I created the world. I'm involved in the world. I know what is going on constantly. And I will do whatever I want with the world whenever I want, for purpose that is up to me, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's now time to save Klal Yisrael from their exodus, from their their slavery. Therefore, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, just as I have been around from the beginning of time and even before, I am still here involved in the world as we are speaking. Says the Sefer HaChinuch, K'ma she'asa b'Mitzrayim, like Hashem did in Egypt, sheshina tivei olam bishveleinu. Hashem changed the nature of the world for our benefit. Now, what are we supposed to learn out from this? We're supposed to learn out that just as HaKadosh Baruch Hu changed the nature of the world for our benefit, He made the river into blood. He brought lice out of the sand. He made the firstborn of the Egyptians die, but we ourselves continued to live and went on into the wilderness, and we eventually came to Har Sinai to receive the Torah. Just as HaKadosh Baruch Hu back then, He was willing to change the nature of the world on our behalf. So we know as well that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, if He wants to, He can change the nature of the world for us as well. Because Hashem, as He continues to write, HaKadosh Baruch Hu made great new miracles that were awesome, they were awesome, they were enormous, they were gigantic. HaKadosh Baruch Hu did all of that for us. And therefore, any person who denied the existence of Hashem, any person who said the world is not under HaKadosh Baruch Hu's control, it's kind of just running on automatic pilot, Hashem has no say or ability in the world anymore. When we study the events of Yetzias Mitzrayim and we see everything that has taken place, it allows us to realize that there is a world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Bari Olam, created, and it is a world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is completely involved with all of the time. And just like in Mitzrayim, He switched things around because He knew what was going on. We trust be'emunah shleima, with complete faith, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu can do the same things in our lives as well. He can change things around. He can switch things on our behalf in order that we should have our own personal geula, our redemption as well. Umekayma me'amuna b'yediyas Hashem Yisbarach. Through the exodus of Egypt, we're able to keep our amunah, our faith strong, b'yediyas Hashem, with the knowledge of Hashem. Because we see from that story, all of the events of the Exodus, we see that Hashem's hashgacha, His loving glance, His involvement in the world, and His never-ending abilities to do what He wants to do, it was in the klalim, in all the major events, and in the pratim, in the individual details that were there as well. Kulam, everything is under the jurisdiction of Hashem. So the Sefer HaChinuch is pointing out something which is central to our emunah and to our life as a Jew. And that is, what do we believe in fact? When a person says, I believe in Hashem, what do you believe in? People throw around the words Baruch Hashem all the time. Yeah, until they're in trouble. Then it's not so much Baruch Hashem. Why not? If a person believes in Hashem, they really believe that everything that's happening in their lives, it's all from the Rebbeinu Shalom. And if everything is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that means He's involved intimately in my life. Every little detail that is there, it's all Hashem. I learned that out from Yetzias Mitzrayim. That means that the Golus, the exile itself, the suffering the Jewish people went through, it was all from Hashem. And at the right time, when the Geula, when the redemption was supposed to come, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought about that as well. And He said, let me show you who I am. You think that I forgot about you. You think that I'm not watching you. You think that I'm not involved in the world, that there's just this nature. Mother Nature is running the world. The Egyptians are evil. You guys made a lot of mistakes. You became a weakened nation. And they're just going to continue to pound you down again and again and again. The story of Yetzias Mitzrayim shows us that's not true. That although the Jewish people were under the rulership of the Egyptians for 400 years, 210 years, as we mentioned, back-breaking bondage and slavery, nevertheless, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I didn't forget about you. I'm watching and I'm waiting for the time that is opportune to be able to redeem you, because I promised Avraham Avinu, remember, in the great Nevuah, the prophecy that Avraham Avinu had about the history of the Jewish people, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told them there's going to be a time in which the Jewish people are going to go down to a nation that is going to oppress them. And they're going to be a very deep exile and a gullus. But don't forget, Avram, I'm not going to leave you there forever. I will go down with you into the exile and I will bring you out of there.
This is what they gave me. This is so good in Costco.
And I will...
Tasty.
And I will bring you out of there at the right time as well. Says the Sefer Chinuch over here, this is what we have to drill into our minds, into our hearts, and into our souls. We have to get this idea straight, that as HaKadosh Baruch Hu is able to did anything that He wanted to for the Jews in Egypt, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is able to do anything that He wants for us as well. There's a famous story, I have told it over the years, fell into my head right now, and I heard once from Rabbi Pesach Kron in the name of Rav Shalom Shodron, who was his Rebbe, that if a person is ever giving a shir and a story falls into their head, so then it's a sign min hashamayim from the heavens is supposed to tell over this story. So it must be that I'm supposed to tell over this story. If you heard it before, I apologize. If you heard it from me, I apologize even more. But let's tell over the story so we can understand how Hashem runs this world and saves people and brings them their geula, their redemption from their exiles as well. There was a yeshiva bacher in Eretz Yisrael, a young fellow learning in yeshiva, and he started dating, and it just wasn't going. No matter who he went out with, there was always some problem down the road. It didn't work, and he was getting older and older. And he was getting bothered by the fact that he couldn't get married. Now the issue is that he knew what it was that was making it so hard for him. And that's because he had a very major scar running down his face. It wasn't very pretty. And the girls would go on dates with him. And normally he was a very charming fellow, charismatic, sweet, warm, very beautiful midos, character traits as well. And when they would get involved in a conversation, he used to be able to, he would bring them in. But at a certain point, he would notice their eyes would drift off from him and they would start looking at the scar. And the next thing he knew, at the end of the day, it was over. He would get a call from the shadchan. The girl didn't want to go out and you're a great guy, everything, but it's not for her. And he knew why it wasn't for her. Just parenthetically, there was once a fellow in yeshiva, when I was learning in Ner Yisrael in Baltimore, and he had some kind of major accident in his life, and half of his face was deformed. Half of his face. One half was completely natural, the other half was completely deformed. And he was a very confident fellow. He knew what he looked like, but he was a very confident fellow. He didn't let it get him down. He knew people looked at him, he knew people stared at him, and the like. So he was such an incredible person. His midos, his character, his belief, his confidence, his self-confidence in himself was so incredible. I said to my wife, she had a very good friend, I said, I think that this boy is actually very good for your friend. I know that he has this blemish, that half of his face is deformed, is damaged, but he's such an amazing person. He's going to make an incredible husband and a father. So we called my wife's friend, told her all the good things about the boy. She got very excited. I said, but there's one thing you have to know, and that is that half of his face is deformed. She said, ooh, you didn't tell me that. I said, we told you the good stuff in the beginning, but you should know it doesn't bring him down. He's a happy person. He's optimistic. He's upbeat. So she said, okay, let me speak to my Rebbe about it. She asked the Rebbe, she said, listen, all these wonderful things about him, but half of his face is not normal like the other half of the face. She said, should I go out with him? So the Rebbe told her, if you're asking the question already, that means that it's not for you. The girl that's going to marry this young man is not even going to flinch from the fact that there's something wrong with one half of his face. It's not going to be a blemish in her eyes. If you look at it as a blemish already, then it's not for you. And in fact, she never went out with him. And some short time later, we find out that this fellow is a chassan. He got engaged to a girl, regular, normal, pretty looking girl, who did not look at the half of his face as a blemish. She saw the entire picture, the entire package, and everything was good for her. So this young man, going back to our story, was living in Eretz Yisrael. And he had this major scar that was running down his face. And he knew that that's why all the girls wanted to get married to him. So as he was getting older, he decided he's going to go to Rav Chaim Kanievsky, the Gadol Ador, the leader of our generation. And he's going to ask him, what should he do? He has no idea how to get married because every girl is turned off by his scar. So Rav Chaim Kanievsky, who's known to have what's called Ruach HaKodesh, like a divine inspiration, he says things that come out of the heavens. When the boy told him his whole sad story and all the difficulties of why it is that he's not able to get married, and the scar itself came from a fascinating story itself, Chaim told him, the next girl that you go out with, tell her the story of how you got your scar. No bracha, no everything's going to be okay. Just the next girl that you go out with, tell her the story of how you got your scar. Okay? Rav Chaim says that's what you do. A few days later, he has a date with a young lady. And they go out, and of course, everything is going well, as it always does. They're talking, they're laughing, they're schmoozing, they're getting along with each other. And then suddenly he notices, once again, the girl's eyes start drifting off of his face, and she starts focusing in on the big scar that's on the side over there. And he knows at that point, game over, that's the end of the shidduch. But Rav Chaim Kanievsky told them, the next girl that you go out with, tell her the story of how you got the scar. So he looks at this young lady and he says, would you like to know how I got this scar? And she was very embarrassed. She didn't want him to know. He said, I know. It bothers everybody. But let me tell you the story of how I got this scar. And he says, one day I was walking through the Arab quarter in Yerushalayim, the old city. And I was walking on my way to the Kaisel to go daven by the Wailing Wall. And as I'm walking, I hear screams, the screams of young girls, of teenage girls. And I start looking and I see that there's 3, what looks like to me, seminary girls. And they are running for their lives from an Arab man that has a knife in his hand and he's going to slice them. So I quickly react and I run over and I start screaming and yelling at the Arab to leave them alone. And the Arab man turns around on me with his knife and he goes shoo, and he slashes me in the face. I'm lying there on the ground. By that time, the girls had gotten away. They called the soldiers. The soldiers come in. They whisk me off to the hospital. And while I'm losing blood, and they bring in a plastic surgeon and they tried to repair my face the best that they could. But this is the best that the doctors could do under the circumstances. And that's why my face looks the way that it does. At this point, the young girl's head is down like this. And he's starting to feel very bad. Maybe he scared her. He said something he should not have said. And she lifts up her face and there are tears in her eyes. And the young lady says to the man, I've been looking for you for the last 3 years to thank you for saving my life. I was one of those girls that was being pursued and chased by the Arab. And had you not come and distracted him and screamed at him and fought on our behalf, who knows what he would have done to us? You're the one who saved my life. I can never repay you. I can never say thank you enough. You know the end of the story. They ended up getting engaged and they lived happily ever after. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I can change water into blood. I can make the sun disappear and I can bring darkness into the world that is so thick and is so deep. Nobody will be able to move. The Midrashim say over there that the Egyptians could not even breathe for 3 days straight in the plague of darkness. I could split the sea for the Jewish people and let them run through and then close it up on the Egyptians at the end. I did all of that. So I can't bring a chassan and a kala together. Allow them to meet one night right after Reb Chaim Kanievsky told them, you tell over the story of your scar. And through that, the shidduch is going to be made. I can do anything that I want. I'm Hashem. And that's like it says over here in the Iyun Tefillah, that the Jewish people have to know that just as I was Go'aleinu, as I redeemed you from Mitzrayim, just as I took you out of the pain and the suffering that was going on over there, you should know, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, strengthen yourself in your emunah, in your faith, in your belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'll do the same thing from you. I didn't abandon the world. I didn't leave the world. It's not running by chance, by mikra, by coincidence. No such thing, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As I was watching the Jewish people all the years while they were in Mitzrayim in Egypt, I'm watching you every single day of your life as well. And whatever you are going through, you should know, I'm the one that is dictating. I am the one that is running the show. I am the one that is keeping everything the way that it should be. And if a person would find themselves in a gullus, in some kind of an exile, personal, family, communal, pandemic of the world, you should know, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in an instant, b'chipazai, like we saw in the pasuk in the verse, instantaneously, when I'm ready to redeem you, I'll bring you the redemption. Operation Warp Speed, the vaccine that's supposed to save the whole world, it's not going to save the world unless we remember and we acknowledge and we recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Go'aleinu, He is our Redeemer. And just as quickly as He brought this pandemic to the world, when He wants to, He can remove it from the world as well. Just like we find other pandemics in history, they stopped at a certain point. So too we have to believe, be'emunah shleima, we have to trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the one who took us out of Mitzrayim and split the sea and did everything in between. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu is ready for Geula and for the redemption, it comes b'chipazai, instantaneously. And that's the pasuk over here. Therefore, a person has an obligation, Laman Tizkor as Yoim Tzeis Chomeres Mitzrayim. You have to remember the day that you were taken out of Egypt. Kol Yemei Chayecha, all the days of your life. Why all the days? Because we all live in a realm of galus, of exile. We all live in a realm where the lights are always not shining so bright upon us. We all live in a time where we feel that we are shackled down, we are trapped by different powers around us. We all feel that. But don't forget, remember the Yetziah, the Exodus from Egypt, and when a person does that, they will be inspired with emunah and with faith. There is a sefer called Orchos Chaim, which was written by the Rosh, one of the Rishonim we're talking about in the realm of a Rashi. And the Rosh, speaking about this week's Parsha, says over the following words. And he says, Livtoich ba'Hashem. A person must trust in Hashem b'chol levavecha, with all of their heart. Ulahamin b'ashkachasa pratis, and believe in the fact that Hashem watches over everybody's life individually and is involved. Hashkacha pratis, He's involved in our lives. He's doing everything. Ubezet tekayim bilvavcha, and when a person believes, they trust with all of their heart that Hashem is the mashgiach, He's watching over everything, and He's intimately involved, then it will be teskayim, it will be implanted inside of our hearts. Hayichud hashalem, the complete unity of Hashem's existence. Bahamin boy ki einav mishoitetais b'chol haaretz. We will believe in Hashem that His eyes are watching over the entirety of the world. V'einav al kol darchei ish. Hashem watches all of our actions. Ubaychen leiv, He examines our hearts. V'chayker kalayos, and He delves into our innards. He sees what we are made of. You understand what it means to believe in Hashem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, He's a mashgiach. A mashgiach, go to the kitchen in a restaurant. What's the mashgiach doing? A good mashgiach. He doesn't sit on his laurels. He's not resting over there, going through his phone. He's not eating to get a good meal over there because he's hungry and he's tired. He's busy running around the kitchen left and right, making sure no bugs in this lettuce. And they turn on the fires. I turned on the fires over here. And this one was made in the right way, and the meat and the fish are not overlapping with each other. And he sees that everything is, there's no mistakes. All the food has hechsherim that come in, and everything is being delivered is the right way. He's making sure that everything is right. They say Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was not a very tall person. I think he was less than 5 feet tall. And when he went one year to the matzah baking factory to be mashgiach, to watch over, to make sure everything was okay. So he was an older man at the time. He was he's slight of appearance. They said he was moving so fast they could not keep up with him. Boom, over here, the flour, the water. How fast are they kneading everything? How fast are they rolling it out? How's the fire looking? How's it cooking, baking everything? 18 minutes. That's a mashgiach. A mashgiach doesn't rest. A mashgiach doesn't stop looking. His eyes are meshaytetos. They're looking at everything all the time to make sure that everything is in order with kashrus. Should be the way that it is. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the mashgiach over the entire universe. He's watching over everything. And his einayim, his eyes are meshaytetos. They are looking at it all. They're watching it all. He sees everything that's going on constantly. He never removes his glance from the world. Even in the times of Hester Panim, when he conceals his face, you just can't see it. You don't realize that he's involved. But Hashem is watching everything constantly, all of the time. Says the Orches Chaim, Ki mi she'eno ma'amin, because someone who does not believe. Now we're coming to this week's parsha, Seres Hadibros, 10 Commandments. What's the first one? Anoichi Hashem Elokecha she'hotzeisicha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibeis avadim. I am Hashem, your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. And that's the mitzvah of Amunah, to believe in Hashem. That means that the mitzvah that we have to believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu is predicated on the fact that He is the one that took us out of Egypt. Says the Orches Chaim, Ki mi she'eno ma'amin asher hotzeisicha me'eretz Mitzrayim. Someone who doesn't believe in the second part of the verse, that Hashem is the one who took us out of Egypt, Af ba'anoichi Hashem Elokecha eino ma'amin, he also doesn't believe that I am Hashem your God. Says the Rosh, you know what all of our emunah, our belief, hinges upon. What is the Yesayid HaGadol v'Amod HaChazak? What is the tremendous foundation and the strong, mighty pillar of our emunah? It is based upon Anoichi Hashem Elokecha she'hotzeisicha me'eretz Mitzrayim. I took you out of the land of Egypt. Yitzias Mitzrayim, the exodus of Egypt itself, is that which infuses us with our emunah in Hashem. Ve'ein zeh yichud shalom. And if you don't believe in the exodus, and you don't spend time delving into it to understand the details that were there, the miraculous things that Hashem did, which means that He saw every little detail, then you don't have true amunah, true belief in Hashem. Kiza yosigulas Yisrael This is what makes Klal Yisrael the most treasured nation. Al kol ha'amim, from all the other nations of the world. V'zeh yesod kol ha'Torah kula, and this is the foundation of all of the Torah, which means the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu took us out of Mitzrayim. The fact that He never forgot about us, and He was watching over us, and He was dealing with us every step of the way. This is why we are a segula, why we are a treasure. And when a Jew has that emunah, they have that belief, that faith in HaKadosh Baruch Hu that is so strong and so solid, that's what makes us so beloved and so beholden in the eyes of Hashem. So therefore, Yetzias Mitzrayim, we see not only is it something you have to remember every single day, because understanding and knowing and having that knowledge and that awareness is something very important. We understand from these words over here that the entirety of Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that He is my God. It all hinges upon one's belief and connection to the Exodus, to the exile, and to the redemption of the Jewish people in Mitzrayim. Because there is the place in history that Hashem revealed Himself completely to our nation. He showed that the world is not running by happenstance. He showed that He's involved, which means He's the creator. He is aware of what is going on, and He is intimately involved in all of the events and all of the actions that are taking place over here. So I just want to leave you off with one idea, and we'll have to come back and revisit more of this next week. But Rav Chatzkel Levenstein writes on these words of understanding that if you don't believe in Yetzias Mitzrayim, then you don't really believe in Hashem. He says a part of that is this. Tamin, you should believe. She'av ata yochel latzeis mehara l'toiv. A Jew has to believe that he can also leave the bad and head towards the good. Ula alois mituma lekedusha. He can go from impurity to holiness. Kishneihem me'Hashem yizbarach shemai, because both of these ideas are from Hashem. Meaning, when we were in Mitzrayim, there was a lot of ra, there was a lot of bad. The Egyptians were nasty people. The Jewish people had assimilated. We found ourselves in a bad shape. And there was torture, and there was slavery, and there was bondage, and the Jewish people almost left to be destroyed. Nevertheless, the Geula, the redemption, took us from the Ra to the Toiv, to the good. We went free. We began to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we became a nation unlike any others. And we know that we're on the 49th level of tomb of impurity, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought us through the wilderness till we came to our Sinai, Mount Sinai, and over there, Mount Sinai, we received the Torah while we were on the 49th level of Kiddush, of sanctity. Just like HaKadosh Baruch Hu did that then, every person has to realize in their life, and this is part of our Amunah in Yetzias Mitzrayim, every person has to realize that Hashem can take you from the bad to the good, from the impure to the pure and the holy. And just like a person, just like the Jewish people were in the Gullus, they were in the exile, so too a person has to realize whatever exiles a person feels themselves that they are in, never despair and never give up hope, because just as Hashem saved the Jewish people when it was hopeless, so too in our lives as well, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will redeem and He will bring us salvation. Just like the case of the story of this young man over here with the scar on his face. In an instant, from one day to the next, HaKadosh Baruch Hu turned his whole world around. And the scar that ended up being the most destructive, devastating part of his life, it became the mark of distinction that got him his wife, and he can live happily ever after with a wife and with children and a beautiful family. So too, those things in our own lives which are the ra, which look like the bad, those things that look like the tomb of the impure, don't forget the things that seem that they're going wrong. Don't forget, in an instant, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can change it all around. And therefore, Leman Tiskor, we have an obligation every single day to remember, not just in our minds and our hearts, but to say over the words, to express them, to articulate them with our mouths. Because ish lefi mahalaloi, whatever you talk about, whatever you praise, whatever's on your mind, the words that come into this world, that defines who you are as a person. And as we begin to get our feet wet in the world of the shishas, the chiros, the 6 remembrances that we have, we're going to keep it in mind, not just in our minds and our hearts, but we're going to say it with our mouths every day after davening. We'll say over these words, L'man tiskor, as it says, L'man tiskor, it says, remember the exodus from Egypt and everything that goes along with it, all of the days of your life. Okay, Be'ez Hashem, next week we'll continue with some more ideas over here on the exodus from Egypt, and that will carry us, I believe, to the next, from number 1 to number 2, God willing. Thank you for joining us. Naftali, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Hopefully we'll see you in Shul next week. All the best.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. You're welcome.